All right, shalom, shalom, shalom. It is a new moon, the first day of the fifth month. All praises to the Most High for another opportunity to celebrate uh, a new moon, a new month, and a new opportunity to continue serving the Most High. All praises to the Abba. Uh,
Hallelujah.
yes, indeed. I'm joined this evening by my most esteemed Aka Kenaniah. Shalom, Aki.
Hey, happy new moon, Ak. Happy new moon, Yasharal. Call Halal Yahweh. Bahashem, Hamashiach, Wamalak, Yahweh Shah, Barakatah.
Yes, indeed. Happy new moon, Aki, no doubt. And all praises to the Most High for another opportunity again. Uh, so we're not going to spend waste a lot of time. We're going to just get to a video review here, and we're going to edify with some historical context on our people and some of the things that we've had to deal with in this land of our captivity. So enjoy the video the best you can, and the link is in the description box. A little something for us to learn from. This comes to us from Black Culture Unlocked. The name of the video is History's Most Disturbing Slave Photos. You cannot look away. You can't look away. All right, here we go.
By the turn of the 18th century, European merchants were building vessels capable of transporting hundreds of enslaved people per journey. These ships had extra portholes for ventilation, weapons mounted on deck in case of rebellion, and additional compartments added below deck to take on more human cargo.
What if the images you're about to see were not just history, but a painful reminder of the atrocities that shaped our world? Images so disturbing, they'll haunt you forever. Slavery, an institution built on the exploitation and dehumanization of millions, is often talked about in broad terms. But what if we could show you the raw, untold truth, captured in photographs, engravings, and art that expose the brutal reality faced by those who lived through it? Let's get started. The scourged back. Imagine a man named Peter, his body a map of horror. Known as Whipped Peter, countless lashes scarred this enslaved man's back, each one a mark of the cruelty he endured. The image of his mutilated back, captured in 1863 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, is one of the most chilling photographs of the American slavery era. The keloid scars crisscrossing his body were not the result of a single beating, but of years of whippings, each lash from a slave owner's whip meant to punish, to break, to remind him of his position in a brutal system that saw him as property, not a person. The photograph was taken by McPherson and Oliver, and quickly became an iconic image. It was widely distributed by abolitionists to show the physical evidence of the brutality of slavery. Peter's scarred back wasn't just a personal trauma. It was a symbol of the systemic violence that millions of enslaved Black people experienced across the southern United States. The photo starkly revealed the savage reality of life for enslaved people, where every act of resistance, every attempt to fight back or assert their humanity, was met with violent retribution. This image, published in Harper's Weekly in July 1863, was not merely a depiction of suffering, it was a call to action. It was part of a larger abolitionist campaign aimed at turning public opinion against slavery. Before this image, many Americans were unaware of the depth of violence that slavery involved. The photo of Peter's back left little room for ambiguity. It was a visceral, undeniable cry for justice, a visual testament to the suffering that had been inflicted upon millions. Slave auction in Virginia. From Peter's suffering, we move to the stark, impersonal cruelty of the auction block. In 1856, an engraving captured the moment when a young woman and her child were sold to the highest bidder in Virginia. This scene, though familiar in the history of slavery, remains no less devastating. Families were torn apart in an instant, with no regard for the deep emotional bonds shared between them. The bidders stand as silent witnesses, while the woman and her child face a fate decided by the cold, calculating hands of human commerce. Their story, like so many others, was not theirs to tell. At the auction, enslaved people were nothing more than property, and the highest bidder became their new owner. The emotional toll of being separated from loved ones was immeasurable. Mothers and fathers were sold away from their children, husbands torn from their wives. It was a brutal, dehumanizing system where family ties held no value. The auctioneer's voice, cold and impersonal, echoed through the market as enslaved people stood on display, waiting for their lives to be bargained for. The image serves as a powerful reminder of the heartbreak and trauma experienced by millions of enslaved people. It was a cruel irony that enslaved families, once torn apart by auction blocks, were sometimes sold back together as a family unit to satisfy the economic needs of the slaveholder. Even the smallest moment of connection was shaped by the needs of the institution, not by human compassion. Iron muzzle punishment. The brutal nature of slavery is further exemplified by the image of an enslaved woman forced to wear an iron muzzle, a device designed to silence and subdue. This punishment, often used for minor transgressions, was a deliberate means to strip individuals of their voice and humanity. The woman in the illustration can no longer speak, eat, or drink freely. Her very ability to exist without torment is denied. This act of silencing was not just physical, but psychological, meant to remind her and all enslaved people that their every action was under constant surveillance and control. The iron muzzle was often used on those who were perceived as insubordinate or rebellious, creating an extra layer of torment for anyone subjected to it. It was an overt tool of subjugation, intended not only to physically punish, but also to crush the spirit. Enslavers used this device to communicate their absolute control, to remind the enslaved of their powerlessness. It was an effective tool for reinforcing silence and obedience, keeping those who were enslaved in a state of constant fear and submission. This punishment serves as a vivid example of how enslavers sought to control every aspect of their human property. By taking away even the most basic functions, speech, eating, and drinking, they stripped away the humanity of their victims, forcing them to submit entirely. The image is a stark reminder of the lengths to which slaveholders went to maintain their dominance, using both physical violence and psychological manipulation to keep enslaved people under their control. Slave ship Brooks Deck Plan. From the brutal physical punishment on land, we now turn to the ocean, the terrifying journey known as the Middle Passage. The Brooks slave ship diagram reveals the horrific conditions enslaved Africans endured as they were packed into the ship's hold, shackled and starved, suffering from suffocation and disease. This image, depicting how 482 people were squeezed into a space no larger than a coffin, made the brutality of the transatlantic slave trade visible to the world. It sparked outrage and helped galvanize abolitionist movements across Europe and America, offering a glimpse into the unthinkable suffering these men and women endured just to survive the journey. The Brooks Deck Plan was used as a visual tool by abolitionists to show how enslaved Africans were transported in the most inhumane conditions imaginable. The cramped space, the inability to move, and the lack of ventilation contributed to the high death toll among those who were forcibly brought across the Atlantic. Disease spread like wildfire, and many captives died before they ever reached their destination. The diagram served as a powerful symbol of the dehumanization that was central to the slave trade, depicting the captives not as people, but as mere property to be packed away and transported. This image marked a turning point in the abolitionist movement as it helped the public visualize the horrors of the Middle Passage in a way that words alone could not convey. The sight of men, women, and children shackled together in inhumane conditions made the reality of the slave trade undeniable. The diagram of the Brooks ship brought the suffering of the enslaved across the Atlantic into the hearts and minds of people who might otherwise have remained ignorant. It was an essential weapon in the fight against slavery, illustrating the moral urgency of ending the trade once and for all. Captives on the slave ship Wildfire. The Wildfire ship provides another glimpse into the illegal slave trade that continued even after the international slave trade was banned. Rescued in 1860 by the U.S. Navy, the 510 captives aboard this ship were photographed as they were freed from their nightmare. The images show them huddled together, emaciated and disoriented, having been crammed into the ship like cargo. Their bodies tell stories of desperation and resilience, of lives that were not considered valuable until they were freed. This photograph marks a tragic chapter in history where human lives were treated as commodities, hidden behind the veil of the law. Though the international slave trade had been abolished in 1808, illegal trafficking continued well into the Civil War era. The image of the captives aboard the Wildfire highlights how the desire for profit was enough to continue exploiting human lives, despite laws meant to protect them. These individuals had been captured, sold, and transported across the ocean, only to be freed at the last moment. The photograph is a powerful reminder that the abolition of the slave trade didn't mark the end of the suffering for many enslaved people. It simply changed how they were trafficked and exploited. The Wildfire photograph also symbolizes the enduring fight for freedom and justice. Though these people were caught in the clutches of a cruel system, their freedom was ultimately claimed not just by law, but through the collective action of those who refused to let their suffering go unnoticed. The photo serves as both a reminder of the lasting scars of slavery and a testament to the resilience of those who fought, both in visible ways and in the hidden struggles that unfolded behind closed doors. Forced cotton picking on a plantation. Imagine standing in the fields of the American South under the scorching sun, your body bent in the relentless rhythm of cotton picking. In this 1850s photograph, enslaved men, women, and children toiled in the cotton fields, working from sunrise to sunset. The overseer, mounted on horseback, watches over them, ready to enforce discipline with the threat of violence. This scene, like countless others, was an everyday reality for the millions who worked the fields. They were not just laborers, they were trapped in a system where every moment of their lives was controlled by others. The cotton industry was the backbone of the Southern economy, but it was built on the backs of enslaved laborers. Forced to meet unreasonably high daily quotas, these individuals endured back-breaking work, often under the constant threat of punishment. The photo captures a moment of toil, but it also reveals something deeper: the exhaustion, the fear, and the despair of those who had no choice but to labor. Sugar plantation in the West Indies. The Caribbean sugar plantations were among the most brutal workplaces for enslaved people, and the toll they took on human lives was devastating. This 1820s illustration reveals the grueling labor that enslaved people endured as they harvested sugarcane under the scorching sun. The sugar mills, powered by enslaved labor, were death traps where lives were worked away, often in less than 7 years. The physical exhaustion from cutting cane, combined with the dangerous machinery in the mills, led to extremely high mortality rates. For plantation owners, the enslaved were expendable, replaced when they died from overwork, disease, or violence. The sugar trade was an economic powerhouse, but it was built on the broken bodies of those forced to work these plantations. Enslaved workers had to endure the sweltering heat, the constant physical labor, and the ever-present threat of punishment. Many were subjected to violent whippings and other forms of cruelty to ensure they met their quotas. This illustration captures the relentless cycle of hard work and physical abuse that defined life on a sugar plantation. Whipping of an enslaved woman in Suriname. In Dutch Guiana, a modern-day Suriname, enslaved people were subjected to some of the most extreme forms of punishment. This engraving, titled Flagellation of a Female Sambo Slave, published in 1796, shows a young woman being brutally whipped by 2 overseers. Her body is covered in blood from the lashes, a gruesome reminder of the violence enslaved people faced when they stepped out of line. This engraving was based on the eyewitness account of John Gabriel Stedman, who described the woman's suffering after receiving 200 lashes. When he intervened, the overseer doubled her punishment to 400 lashes as a warning against interference. The brutality depicted in this image was not an anomaly. It was the norm on many plantations. Enslaved people lived in constant fear of violent retribution for the smallest infractions. Whether they were accused of disrespecting a master, trying to escape, or simply failing to meet the brutal demands of their labor, punishment was swift and often lethal. Whippings were a form of fear, designed not just to inflict physical pain, but to break the spirit of those subjected to them. Slave Pen Jail in Alexandria. In Alexandria, Virginia, a horrifying reality awaited those who had been sold into slavery. This photograph shows the interior of a slave pen, a holding area where enslaved people were kept in cramped, iron-barred cells while awaiting their fate. These pens were located on major slave trading routes, and many enslaved people spent days or even weeks in these conditions, subjected to unspeakable cruelty. The fear of being sold away from family and loved ones was constant, and the squalid, inhumane conditions of these pens were a grim prelude to the further suffering that awaited them at auction. Slave pens were a key part of the infrastructure that kept slavery alive in the United States. They were the warehouses of human misery, places where people were treated like cattle, stored, confined, and traded. The image of these holding cells serves as a powerful reminder of how enslaved people were commodified, their lives reduced to a simple transaction. But even in these horrific conditions, enslaved individuals found ways to resist. Some attempted escape, others organized quiet acts of rebellion. But for many, these pens represented the final stop before being torn from their families, sold off to a life of unrelenting labor and suffering. Branded slave with iron collar. The image of Wilson Chinn, an enslaved man from Louisiana, is one of the most striking photographs of slavery's cruelty. In this 1863 photograph, Wilson is shown with a permanent brand on his forehead, marking him as the property of his enslaver and an iron collar around his neck. The brand, bearing the initials of his enslaver, was a reminder that he was not considered a person, but rather a piece of property to be owned and controlled. The iron collar, designed to keep him in line, was another form of punishment meant to break his spirit and keep him submissive. What makes this photograph particularly powerful is not just the image of suffering, but the dignity that Wilson Chinn conveys. Despite the physical torment he endured, he stands tall, his eyes looking directly at the camera, as if to assert that even in the face of such dehumanization, he still retained his humanity. The iron collar and the brand were meant to strip him of his identity, but his defiance in this image suggests that slavery could take his body, but it could never fully take his soul. Here's a quick reminder. Please like, share, and subscribe to Black Culture Unlocked for powerful Black news, real stories of our heroes and leaders, and the rich culture and history the world tried to forget. Slave revolt in Haiti. In Haiti, the fight for freedom ignited in a violent and transformative rebellion. In 1791, enslaved Africans in the French colony of Saint-Domingue rose in an act of defiance that would forever change the course of history. This engraving, Burning of the Plain du Cap, Massacre of Whites by the Blacks, vividly depicts the revolt that saw enslaved people, armed with machetes and pikes, burning down plantations and killing slaveholders. The flames of revolt didn't just destroy the property of the colonizers. They set alight a path to freedom for enslaved Africans. The Haitian Revolution, a war fought with blood and fire, was the first and only successful slave revolt in history, leading to the creation of an independent Black republic. The bravery of those who fought was driven by more than a desire for survival. It was a fight for dignity, humanity, and the right to be free. The enslaved in Haiti were no longer willing to submit to a life of forced labor, violence, and dehumanization. They rose, armed with the weapons of their oppression, determined to overthrow a system that had enslaved them for centuries. The violence of the rebellion, as seen in this image, was met with fierce resistance from the French colonizers, but the enslaved did not retreat. They fought for a future that was their own, and in the end, they triumphed. The Haitian Revolution is a testament to the power of resistance, a reminder that even in the darkest of circumstances, those who are oppressed can fight for their freedom and prevail. The revolt in Haiti was not just an act of rebellion, it was an affirmation of the humanity of those who had been denied it for so long. Atrocity in the Congo Free State. The brutality of colonialism reached its zenith in the Congo Free State, a private colony owned by King Leopold II of Belgium. In this haunting 1904 photograph, a Congolese man named Nsala stares at the severed hand and foot of his 5-year-old daughter, Boali, who was killed and dismembered by agents of Leopold's rubber concession company. The child's death was punishment for her father's failure to meet the rubber collection quota. In the image, Nsala is overcome with grief, his anguish laid bare for the world to see. The Congo Free State was a place of unspeakable horrors, where the native population was subjected to forced labor in the rubber trade under the threat of violence, mutilation, and death. The rubber companies employed brutal tactics to ensure that the Congolese people met their quotas. Those who failed to comply were often punished by having their hands or feet severed, a gruesome reminder of the absolute power the colonizers held over the lives of the indigenous people. The mutilations were used as a means of instilling fear and maintaining control over the population, ensuring that they would comply with the demands of the colonial regime. This photograph, taken by British missionary Alice Seeley Harris, helped expose the atrocities being committed in the Congo Free State. Enslaved boy punished in Zanzibar. Even after the abolition of slavery, the specter of bondage lingered in some parts of the world. In Zanzibar, a British missionary captured this chilling photograph in the late 19th century, showing a young enslaved boy chained to a heavy log as punishment for a minor offense. The log, which weighed 32 pounds, was chained to the boy's ankle and forced him to carry it around wherever he went. This cruel punishment was meant to humiliate and control the child, an act of oppression that was meant to instill submission and fear. The legal abolition of slavery in Zanzibar came in 1897, but this photograph reveals that the practice of enslaving people and subjecting them to brutal punishment persisted well beyond the official end of the system. The boy's fate was dictated not by law, but by the whims of his enslaver, a harsh reminder that even when slavery was formally abolished, the systems of control and exploitation didn't disappear overnight. This photograph became a powerful tool in the fight against the illegal slave trade in East Africa, bringing attention to the ongoing abuses that took place behind closed doors. Zanzibar was a major hub for the East African slave trade, with enslaved Africans being captured from the interior and sold to Arab, Persian, and Ottoman buyers. The photograph of this boy, his small body burdened with the weight of the log, serves as a visual indictment of the enduring systems of exploitation that continued well into the 20th century. It was a sobering reminder that the end of slavery was not an end to the violence and control that had defined it. It was simply a new chapter in a long history of oppression, slave coffle in Central Africa. In the heart of Africa, far from the familiar image of the American South, the slave trade continued to tear families apart. Dr. David Livingstone, during his Zambezi expedition, witnessed the horrific sight of a slave coffle, a chained caravan of captives being marched toward the coast. The coffle, shown in this 1861 illustration, reveals the grim reality of the East African slave trade. Enslaved men, women, and children are shackled together, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and fear. They are being marched to the coast, where they will be sold to the highest bidder. The coffle was a sight seen throughout the African continent, a physical manifestation of the slave trade that stretched across both the Atlantic and Indian Ocean worlds. Enslaved people, often captured in raids or sold by other Africans, were marched hundreds of miles, chained and malnourished, to reach the slave markets. The journey was often fatal. Many died from exhaustion, disease, or violence before they ever reached their destination. The image of the coffle serves as a stark reminder that the African slave trade was not limited to the West. It was a global phenomenon that ravaged the lives of millions across continents. Revolt aboard the Amistad. In 1839, aboard the Spanish slave ship La Amistad, a group of enslaved Africans defied the chains that bound them, not just physically, but symbolically. Led by Sengbe Pie, known as Sinke, These men and women rose against their captors in a remarkable act of rebellion. Armed with nothing but their determination and sugarcane knives, they overpowered the crew, killing Captain Ramon Ferrer and taking control of the ship. This engraving, titled "Death of Captain Ferrer, the Captain of the Amistad," vividly captures that dramatic moment of resistance. This act of defiance was not only a fight for survival, but it was a battle for dignity. These individuals, who had been forcibly taken from their homeland and sold into slavery, had been stripped of everything, but not their will to fight back. When they seized control of the ship, they asserted their right to live free from the chains of the Atlantic slave trade and free from the system that had dehumanized them. Although their rebellion did not immediately grant them the freedom they fought for, it became a symbol of resistance and hope for enslaved people across the world. The Amistad Revolt was eventually brought before the U.S. courts, where former President John Quincy Adams argued for the release of the enslaved Africans. In 1841, the Supreme Court ruled in their favor, declaring that they had been illegally enslaved. The victory of Sankey and his comrades sent a message to the world: the fight for freedom could not be denied. Their story became a beacon of hope, not only for those who were still enslaved, but for the abolitionist movement as a whole. The rebellion aboard the Amistad was not just a fight for personal liberty. It was an indictment of the institution of slavery itself. The Slave Ship. J.M.W. Turner's masterpiece, The Slave Ship, is a haunting visual representation of the Middle Passage. In this oil painting, human bodies flail in the turbulent waters, shackled together, cast overboard by the slave ship's crew. The image of drowning enslaved Africans, surrounded by sharks and chains, is set against a blood-red sea and an approaching storm, an apt metaphor for the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade. The painting was inspired by the 1781 massacre of 132 enslaved Africans aboard the British ship Zong. The ship's captain, in an attempt to claim insurance for lost cargo, ordered the enslaved people to be thrown overboard, where they met a horrific death. Turner's painting does not merely depict a historical event. It captures the brutal, dehumanizing nature of the slave trade itself. The bodies tossed into the water are no longer individuals. They are reduced to objects discarded in the name of profit. The storm on the horizon represents the moral tempest that was brewing across Britain, as abolitionists began to demand an end to the slave trade. Turner's work shocked viewers, making the moral outrage of the slave trade not just an abstract concept, but a visceral reality. His portrayal of this cruelty was not just an artistic endeavor, it was a powerful piece of activism. A slave auction in Virginia. Family separation. In 1861, on the brink of the Civil War, an engraving titled "A Slave Auction in Virginia" depicted the heart-wrenching reality of family separation. A mother, holding her infant, stands on the auction block, surrounded by an indifferent crowd of white men who are bidding for her and her child. The cruelty of slavery is laid bare as the auctioneer calls out bids, turning human lives into commodities to be bought and sold. The emotion captured in this engraving, especially the anguish of the mother clutching her child, speaks to the trauma that millions of enslaved families endured. Family separation was one of the most devastating aspects of slavery. Enslaved people were often sold away from their loved ones with no regard for the relationships they had formed. Children were ripped from their parents, husbands from wives, and siblings from each other. This was not an anomaly, it was a routine part of the system. Families could be sold in different lots to maximize profit, leaving individuals completely cut off from the only support system they had. The image of this auction reflects the emotional toll of such separations, but it also captures the helplessness that enslaved people faced as they were forced to navigate a world where their very existence was dictated by the whims of their enslavers. East African slave market. The East African slave trade is often overshadowed by the more widely known transatlantic slave trade, but its horrors were no less brutal. In Zanzibar, the slave market continued to operate well into the late 19th century, long after slavery had been abolished in other parts of the world. This late 19th century photograph shows a group of enslaved Africans, men, women, and children, chained together, waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. Arab traders stand nearby, negotiating prices as if they were dealing in cattle rather than human lives. The East African slave trade primarily served the Middle Eastern and Indian Ocean markets, where enslaved Africans were forced to work on plantations, in homes, and as soldiers. The conditions of the trade were just as horrific as those of the transatlantic system. The enslaved individuals were often marched hundreds of miles, shackled and malnourished, to reach the slave markets of Zanzibar. Many did not survive the journey. Those who did were treated as property, sold and traded with no regard for their dignity or humanity. The convict lease chain gang. After the Civil War, Black Americans found themselves trapped in a new system of forced labor, convict leasing. In this 1903 photograph from Florida, a group of young African American men, some of whom appear to be teenagers, stand chained together in a timber camp, performing grueling labor under the supervision of armed guards. This system, born out of the racist black codes that criminalized minor offenses for black people, allowed Southern states to lease prisoners to private companies. These men were often forced to work in mines, on railroads, or in timber camps under inhumane conditions, subjected to abuse and neglect. Convict leasing was a direct continuation of the exploitation that black people faced during slavery. Although legally free, these individuals were still treated as property, forced to work for little to no pay, and subjected to brutal conditions that often led to death. The photograph captures the dehumanization of black men who were once again seen as nothing more than tools for labor, their bodies shackled and controlled. The system of convict leasing allowed the South to maintain its economic structure by relying on forced labor, much like it had during the slavery era. This photograph is a chilling reminder that slavery didn't truly end with emancipation. It simply evolved. The criminalization of black people and the rise of convict leasing represented a new chapter in the long history of racial oppression in America. The men in this chain gang are not just prisoners. They are the embodiment of a system that sought to keep black Americans in a perpetual state of bondage, long after slavery had been officially abolished. The photograph serves as a powerful testament to the continued exploitation of black labor and the enduring legacy of racial injustice, resilience, and resistance. In the face of unimaginable brutality, enslaved people didn't just survive, they resisted. From small acts of defiance to massive uprisings, enslaved people found ways to fight back against the system that sought to break them. Whether through rebellion, escape via the Underground Railroad, or everyday acts of sabotage, resistance was a constant force. One of the most powerful images of this resistance is the escape of enslaved people to Union camps during the Civil War, where they found refuge and a chance to fight for their freedom. These acts of resistance were not just physical. They were deeply spiritual and emotional. Enslaved people resisted by preserving their culture, passing down stories, songs, and traditions that kept their identity alive. Abolitionists like Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, who had once been enslaved themselves, fought tirelessly to end slavery and bring justice to those still suffering. Their courage and determination to resist in the face of oppression are a powerful reminder that enslaved people were never passive victims. They were active participants in their fight for freedom. Even in the face of extreme violence and dehumanization, enslaved people never gave up on the hope of freedom. Their stories of resistance remind us that while slavery was an institution built on cruelty, it was also a system that faced constant resistance, both visible and invisible. The resilience of those who fought back against slavery continues to inspire, reminding us that even in the darkest times, the human spirit can never truly be broken. Did you know about these details? Let us know in the comments section. Did you expect this brutality you just saw? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it, because here, we tell the stories no one else will. From ancient African civilizations to modern Black excellence, we reveal the truth, the power, and the legacy they tried to erase. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.
Okay, so this is our history, and um, as bad as it is, as bad as the experiences that we've had have played and have aged, this is us. This is us.
Were treated as property, sold and traded with.
It's not us forever. It's just us for this time frame. Because us forever is going to be a much better situation, much better circumstance than this. But meanwhile, we're having to endure. And so because we have to endure, it's also our job not to forget that this was the situation that our people were in. And just because we're not roped together like this now does not mean that everything is peaches and cream. That's not at all the case. We can't forget this. We can't just let this slip by the wayside. We have to remember that this was the state of our people, those that came before us. And some of us are descendants from people who were done exactly like that. That's why we show these videos. That's why we highlight this information. As tough as it seems, as hard as it is, that's why we do it, because we cannot let those that came before us be forgotten. Because anybody else on the earth in our situation would have been eradicated. But the Most High have kept us through all of this, through all of these situations and circumstances. He have kept us, protected us, and here and now we are still here, waiting for the return of Hamashiach. I'm gonna rest there. Go ahead, Aki.
Kanak, it's another difficult, video to cover, and we've covered many difficult videos, and it never gets any easier. Hearing about the atrocities that have taken place. You made a good point. This is where we're at right now. The overseer's whip might not be cracking against our back, literally, currently. However, this a system that we currently live in is still oppressive nonetheless. But again, this is our right now. This is not our forever. We've got promises that are written that the Abba has for us, plans to do us good. And I, for one, can't wait. Can't wait. I hate it here, and it might appear that I'm doing well and I get along with people, but I continue to see atrocities, taking place on our people, and it knocks my heart down each time I hear a story or see an event. I'm thankful though that the Most High didn't bring us here to totally destroy us, because if that was the plan, we wouldn't read about us being restored in the scriptures. So all praises to the Most High for all that he's done, all that he's doing, and all that he will do. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. All praises indeed. All right. We're going to go ahead and close it on out. Hope you enjoy the new moon. It is a new month, the 5th month. Oh, I wanted to reiterate and I need to start reiterating, remind me on every new moon, when we're going to keep, they reference the rebellion of Haiti and their freedom that they were able to accomplish. And we're going to keep a remembrance of the freedom of Haiti every second month, the first day of the second month, from here on the Gregorian calendar. So on the Gregorian calendar, when the second month comes in, we're going to keep a remembrance of Haiti, their rebellion, and their victory over their oppressors to get their freedom. So remind me of that, and we'll keep bringing that up. I think it's officially the first month, the first day of the first year on the Well, to commemorate it with we're gonna remember them there in the second month on the first day on the Gregorian calendar, and that's not to be disrespectful. That's just to show we counting them with us. We counting them with us. So there's really no separation. They got their freedom, and we working on ours. So to the Most High, we'll go ahead and close on out. We do this for a specific reason. Book of Romans, chapter 10 and verse 1. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to Ha'ava, to the Father, for Israel, is that they might be saved. We want to see our people saved. We want to see our people set free. We want to see our people restored. How are we going to do it? First of all, we're going to keep the faith, the belief in Hamashiach, the Messiah, come back and do his due diligence and redeem this people as the Most High have promised for us to happen. And also, Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 13, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It is so very important to understand that in the conclusion of the whole matter, we are to fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. At the end of the day, when it is all said and done, all the dust is settled and all the smoke is cleared, we will be judged on whether we have feared the Most High and kept his commandments. Why? For this is the whole duty of man. I am your Akazaki Yahu, joined by my most esteemed Akinanaya, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Hamashiach, Wamalak, Yahweh Shai, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say shalom, wa baruchim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait till the day when the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who hate us under our feet. Until that day come, shalom, family.
Shalom, Mr. Paka.
All praises to the Most High. Praise you, Abba Yah. Kwam Yasha'Allah.
Kwam Yasha'Allah.
Indeed, happy new moon. And Barak Hashem Yahweh.